Welcome to Threads of Evil, the podcast where we unravel the twisted minds behind some of history's most disturbing crimes. I'm your host, and today we're diving in deep into one of the most chilling and methodical serial killers of modern times, Israel Keyes. Unlike most serial killers, Keyes didn't fit the usual profile. He didn't have a specific victim type. He didn't kill for one clear reason, and he meticulously planned his crimes in ways that make him one of the most terrifying figures in criminal history. He was a man who could have been anyone. Your neighbor, your handyman, the guy in the line at the coffee shop. And yet behind that ordinary facade, he was a predator who spent over a decade committing murders across the country without detection. But before we get into his horrific crimes, we need to understand where he came from. Because Israel Keyes didn't just appear out of nowhere. His childhood was a breeding ground for something dark. Israel Keyes was born January 7th, 1978 in Utah. He was the second son of 10 children of Heidi Keyes and John Jeffrey Jeff Keyes, October 4th, 1952 to November 13th, 2002. His parents were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or known to the world as Mormons. His father had been an LDS missionary in Germany. He was homeschooled until 1983. Him and his family left the church when Keyes was 5 years old, and they moved to Colville, Washington. They were isolated from society. The family lived in a one-room cabin with electricity. Later, Keyes became members, and him and his family became members of a church called the Ark, which subscribed to white supremacist Christian ideology. He described the Ark Church Amish-like. During this period of attending the Ark, the Keyes family befriended the neighboring family of Chevy Coho, I may pronounce that wrong, who was later convicted for a 1996 triple murder. At one point, when Keyes was growing up, his family attended another church in Colville called the Christian Israel Covenant Church. That particular church taught British Israelism as a doctrine that miscegenation was abominable and deviant, and that Anglo-Saxons were to rule over the perceived inferior races. So as you can see so far at this point, is his childhood helped shape him into being the psychotic, evil person that he would later on become. So it wasn't by accident. It was years of grooming, warping his mind. He would describe this church almost militia-like. The Keyes children were forced to sleep in a tent due to their cabin's small size and made to hunt their food, chop firewood, and work on local farms to support the family. As a hobby, Keyes admitted to loving to hunt anything with a heartbeat. He once admitted to skinning a deer alive. Keyes was ostracized by other children who attended the Christian Israel Covenant Church. One girl even admitted that Israel Keyes made her skin crawl. Now that's saying a lot, since their church was full of a lot of psychos that were racist. So for them to say, he give me the hibby-jibbities or whatever you'd like to call it, says a lot. Like they were even freaked out by the various things that Israel Keyes would do. And it only got worse from there. But here's a quote, by the way, from Israel Keyes. He said this during an interview with the FBI. "I've known since I was 14 that there were things that I thought were normal and okay, that no one else seemed to think were normal and okay. So that's when I started just being a loner. People found out about some of the stuff I did, like my parents and parents of other kids who would hang out with me. They would find out about some of the stuff I did, and that's when I just started doing it by myself exclusively." I mean, that is just... He knew what he was doing was wrong, and he just kept doing it. So it wasn't like he lacked the ability to understand the difference between right and wrong. He knew the difference, and he just chose to do it anyways. Now, around the age 14, he stood about 6 feet 2 inches, or 1.88 meters. That's pretty tall by, age 14. Now, talk about intimidation if you're one of his victims later on in life. He once admitted to setting a neighbor house on fire just to watch it burn. And they asked him, well, what if there was somebody else, like the FBI when they were interrogating him, well, what if somebody was in it? He said, well, that would have just made it better. Like, that's how bad he was by that point. At a young age, he would break into people's houses. A friend of his used to participate with him, breaking and entering into people's houses until he saw the way he killed animals and the way he killed them. He stole several guns from his neighbor's residence and was forced to apologize by his parents after they discovered the catch. He would sell his guns he stole to adults. I don't know if the adults particularly knew that he stole the guns or really even cared, to be honest. Like, he didn't really hang out with the best of people. He hung out with, like, literally bad people. So it's not really a shock that he became this killer. Now, around this time, Key's parents provided shelter to personal friends. In the presence of their son and daughter and Key's sister, Key's tied a cat to a tree with a parachute cord and gored it with a .22 revolver. The cat began circling the tree before crashing into it and vomiting. He allegedly chuckled before noting that the boy, who later informed his father that he had vomited in response to the incident. Keyes had an epiphany which he felt that he was different from his peers who ran away from him. I mean, and these people are like literally racist. They're like white supremacists that are capable of evil shit, and they ran away from him. This shows the psychotic and the depth of his, what would you call it? His depth of, his, evil, I guess, if you will. I can't think of the words for it. So around this point, that's when Key's mother began to notice some troubling signs. You began to notice some troubling signs at that point, woman? Like, you didn't notice it before, And I mean, you're partially responsible for it, for raising him in this crazy environment. Anyway, sorry. So this is where she began to notice some troubling signs in Keyes during this period when he began turning into various radio stations and different things. I'm not sure what she means by that. But anyways, he was a skilled carpenter building his first wooden cabin for his family at age 16. It's interesting that he was like talented on other things, right? He was a skilled carpenter. And he worked for a Colville contractor from 1995 to 1997. And you're like, with all this talent, he could have, put his talents elsewhere instead of, the things that he was doing. Like, instead of being the psycho, torturer, psychopath, serial killer, he could have put his skills to good use because he was a skilled carpenter. He built a cabin. But instead, he became, an infamous serial killer. I don't get it. But he worked for this Colville contractor from 1995 to 1997. Around this time, he kept a journal with biblical quotations and even documented any time he committed sin, such as lusting after his girlfriend and other various things and whatnot. His family later moved to Smyrna. It's Smyrna, somewhere in Maine. I don't know how to pronounce that, so maybe somebody listening that knows anything about Maine might know how to pronounce that. Anyways, him and his siblings were banned from certain music and movies due to their mother being a religious zealot. Yeah, because like that couldn't go anywhere bad. He was forbidden to learn to play any musical instruments. During this time period, Keyes became an atheist. I mean, I could kind of see why he became an atheist. Like, because he was raised around a bunch of religious zealots that didn't let him do anything and whatnot. Now, obviously, his actions as an atheist obviously don't speak for all atheists, just like the actions of a Christian serial killer wouldn't speak for all Christians. That just happens to be something else that was part of their personality, if you will. Now, this led Keyes' parents to evict Keyes for blasphemy. So they kick Israel out, and then they instructed his younger siblings, who looked up to Israel, to never have contact with him again. Now, this is when Israel Keyes became interested in Satanism, and he wanted to commit a ritual murder. Now, note that actual Satanists do not condone murder, rape, or violence against an innocent person. Most likely, Keyes thought Satanism was like devil worship as portrayed in the media, because I've met plenty of Satanists, and that's just not how they are. Keyes, like I said, probably watched a lot of horror films and thought, oh yeah, that's how Satanists are, and that's just fictional portrayal of, the Christian interpretation of such things. Anyways, so around the summer of 1997 or 1998, Keyes sexually assaulted a teenage girl who had been tubing with her friends down the Deschutes River in Mapen, Oregon. He admitted that he stalked her from a tree line before very violently sexually assaulting her, whom he estimated to be between 14 and 18 at knife point. He originally planned to murder her as part of a satanic ritual, but he had let her go in the river tube he had abducted her from. So yeah, she almost ended up being his first victim, but he was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. And on July 9th, 1998, Keyes relocated and enlisted in the United States Army in the state of New York, where he served as a specialist in the Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 5th Infantry, 25th Infantry Division. He passed a month-long preliminary course for United States Army Ranger training. How did they not see this? Like, usually, from what I know from the military, come from a, military family, they're usually very rigorous on who they let into the military. And somehow this dude passed all their tests. Like, it goes to show, I guess, his intelligence of how he was able to pass as a normal person when there was nothing normal about him. Somehow he was just able to fool them, to bullshit them enough to where they didn't even see what kind of person he truly was. So he was stationed at Fort Lewis and Fort Hood, also spent some time abroad. While stationed in Sinai, Egypt, I may be pronouncing it wrong. I'm sorry. I'm really bad at pronouncing things. He befriended several soldiers, informing one of them that he would like to kill him. You would think at that point the military is like, yeah, no, buddy, you gotta go. I guess they just thought he was joking. I don't know. While he was stationed at Fort Lewis, he served on the mortar team. Former Army friends of Keyes have noted his quiet demeanor and the habit of keeping to himself. And I guess maybe that's how he was able to fool anyone, and they didn't catch on that he was what he was. On the weekends, he drank heavily, consuming entire bottles of his favorite drink, Wild Turkey Bourbon. February of 2001, Keyes was arrested in Thurston County for driving under the influence. Pursuant to a plea agreement, he was fined $350. So yeah, I mean, I guess this is where it slowly started coming undone, but he still wasn't quite caught. Like, still wasn't suspected, I guess, if you will. And he really hadn't, committed his a lot of his, serial killing, or whatever you'd like to call it. Now, he was a fan of the underground hardcore, sometimes referred to as horrorcore, rap group Insane Clown Posse. He had tons of their CDs, posters, and paraphernalia of the said group and their record label, Psychopathic Records. Now, someone who's a fan of ICP, they would never approve of this man or his violent behavior. Like, he was the very thing they were against, especially with the religious part. They didn't like, bigots. They were fine with religion themselves, but like bigotry, murder, rapists, pedophiles, they're not down with that. They have tons of various music, if you will, calling out this kind of behavior. So they would never approve of this kind of behavior. I just thought I'd, put that out there just so people wouldn't be thinking, oh, well, if he's a fan of that group, then it must be bad. No, that not even the thing. Anyways, Israel Keyes was awarded an Army Achievement Medal for his service as a gunner, an assistant gunner from December 1998 to July 2001. He was then honorably discharged and relocated to Knee Bay, Washington. So yeah, like, he was really good at tricking people into thinking he was like this decent person, because he was awarded an Army Achievement Medal for his service as the gunner and assistant gunner. And the thing is like I said, as you can see from this, he was a good carpenter. He was good at being in the military and whatnot. He could have gone a totally different route instead of the route he went. It's not like he didn't have chances or opportunities. So anyways, for a period, Keyes lived in the Maca Reservation community of the Knee Bay on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. He had a Native American girlfriend who had been online and subsequently had a daughter with. Him and his girlfriend broke up, and at the time of his arrest, he was dating a woman who worked as a nurse. In 2007, Keyes started a construction business in Alaska called Keyes Construction while working as a handyman, contractor, and construction worker. And to many, he was known as a skilled worker. Several of the female customers, however, reported Keyes exhibited brief facial expressions or dark moods that made them uncomfortable. So again, more evidence of the other skills that he had. He a handyman, a contractor, construction worker. But the scene of his fakeness, if you will, that he was portraying was slowly starting to come undone, because people were like, about his, facial expressions and these dark moods that just made them outright uncomfortable to be around. He also had ties to New York. He owned 10 acres in a dilapidated cabin in the town of Constable. He targeted random people all across the United States to avoid detection, planning for months before he committed a particular crime. He specifically frequented campgrounds and isolated locations. He claimed to only use guns when he had to and preferred strangulation. This was due to the pleasure he derived from witnessing victims lose consciousness in the struggle. He enjoyed seeing the light of their eyes go out. Like, talk about twisted, right? Like, complete, outright psychopath. I'm not one for the death penalty, but people like Israel Keys make me question that belief. Now, he claimed to not kill children or parents of children, primarily because he had a daughter, whom he feared finding out about him and his crimes. But police and the FBI investigators were skeptical of this claim and suspected him of killing several teenagers and children. So they were like, yeah, we doubt that. We think you did. Somebody as psychopathic as you and sick and disgusting human being as you did. And I agree with them. Like, I agree with the police and the FBI on this. Obviously, he probably did. He is sick. He is twisted in the mind. I mean, if he's willing to torture a cat, trust me, he's willing to torture a small child. He's literally a piece of shit. Now, he did not admit to any murders during his time in the military. He did, however, confess to 2 rapes during that time, one being a sex worker and another being a college student. He confessed to committing bank robberies in New York and Texas. The FBI later confirmed that Keys robbed the Community Bank branch in Tupper Lake, New York in April 2009. So yeah, he was an arsonist, a murderer, a rapist, and God knows what else. He also told authorities he had burglarized a Texas home and set it on fire. An FBI report stated that Keys burglarized 20 to 30 homes across the United States and robbed several banks between 2001 and 2012. He started his killings in 2001 after he left the military. He's at least responsible for 11 deaths in the USA. He did not have a victim profile, which made it hard for the FBI and the police to catch him to begin with because he didn't have a victim profile. And this is why we're not really sure of how many deaths Keys is responsible for. Like, the FBI and the police suspect at least 11 deaths, but that's the ones they suspect. Who knows how many because he didn't have a profile. He chose his victims at random. On his murder trips, yeah, he called them murder trips. He kept his mobile phone turned off and paid for items with cash. For the Courier murders, Keys flew to Chicago where he rented a car to drive 1,000 miles or 1,600 kilometers to Vermont. He then used a murder kit he had hidden 2 years earlier to execute the murders. So he had this thing called murder kits where he would leave the various tools or devices that he needed to kill and torture these people. The outright thought that he put into this is just disturbing on so many levels. Like, this is at, like, John Wayne Gacy levels or Ted Bundy, Son of Sam, Charles Manson kind of thinking. During the interviews with FBI agents and officials in Alaska, Keys directly admitted to 3 murders whose identities were confirmed. Keys confessed to murdering 49-year-old William Bill Scott Courier and 55-year-old Lorraine Simone Courier of Essex, Vermont. He broke into their home on the night of June 8th, 2011. He tied them up before driving them to an abandoned farmhouse where he shot Bill before sexually assaulting and strangling Lorraine. So he made Bill watch as he tortured and assaulted the guy's wife and strangled her. Their bodies have never been found. 2 years prior, Keys hid a murder kit near the Courier home, which he later recovered and used during the crime. After the murders, he moved most of the kit's contents to a new hiding place in Parishville, New York, where they remained until after his arrest. Now, Keys' last confirmed victim, now notice this is confirmed last victim. We're not sure how many victims, how many people he did this crap to, was 18-year-old Samantha Tesla Cohen. I may pronounce her name wrong. She was a coffee booth employee in Anchorage, Alaska. He had kidnapped her from her workplace on February 1st, 2012, took her debit card and other property, sexually assaulted her, then killed her the following day. So he sexually assaulted her, tortured her, and then waited until the next day to kill her. Like, talk about a sick son of a bitch. He left her body in a shed in his backyard and then went to New Orleans. Like it was nothing. Like, whatever. I'm going to leave her body there rotting, whatever, because he just didn't care. To him, it was a game. To him, it was just fun. It was nothing. It was like simple as when somebody else brushes their teeth or takes a shower. To him, it was just second nature, just like that. When he returned to Alaska, he removed her body from the shed, applied makeup to her face, sewed her eyes open with fishing line. Then he took a picture of a 4-day-old issue of the Anchorage Daily News alongside her body, posed to appear that she was alive, then demanded $30,000 in ransom, some of which was paid into her bank account. Keyes dismembered her body and disposed of it in the Matanuska Lake north of Anchorage. Her remains were recovered by the FBI's Underwater Search and Evidence Response Team later. Just, oh my God. So he's like, you know what? He couldn't just kill her and dispose of her. He's like, you know what? I'm also going to hold her family ransom and make them pay me, even though she's dead. Like, just, this guy irks me. So let's discuss his possible victims. There's Julie Marie Harris, a 12-year-old Special Olympics medalist in skiing, disappeared on March 2nd, 1996, while waiting for a ride to a local church. Her remains were found on April 26, 1997, in a wooded area a few miles away in Colville, Washington. Her cause of death was not determined. She was a double amputee. Her prosthetic feet were found by the Colville River a month after her disappearance. Keyes, then 18, lived in the area at the time and was questioned about her case after he was arrested in 2012. He neither confirmed nor denied killing her. Then another possible victim was Cassandra Cassie Emerson, who was 12 years old. This part irks me. 12 years old, I have a kid around that age. And the fact that, it just hits too close to home. Anyways, another young girl from the Colville, Washington area was reported missing after the remains of her mother, Marlene K. Emerson, 29, was discovered in the burned-out trailer home on June 27th, 1997. Cassie's remains were found in 1998, about 13 miles from her home. Keyes did admit his first act of arson was with a trailer in Colville. So that could possibly be one of his other victims. He also admitted to investigators he had killed 5 people in Washington state and was the subject of an active investigation by the state police and the FBI. He claimed to have either buried or submerged a victim in a lake in Nia Bay, Washington between July and October 2001. A body was found, but this death was ruled accidental. He also confessed to a double homicide of a young couple which occurred between 2001 and 2005. According to him, he beat the man to death and strangled the woman. He buried both of them. Between 2005 and 2006, Keyes said he had killed 2 further victims separately. One who was apparently dumped in Lake Crescent, Washington, and the other, Keyes didn't say what it was, but Keyes did not have a felony criminal record in Washington, although he had been stopped on 2 occasions for minor driving-related offenses. Authorities reviewed unsolved murder and missing person case to determine which, if any, may have been the work of Keyes. In 2012, authorities identified a possible victim known only as Lewis County Jane Doe, who was a woman found in the Peterman Hill area in Morton, Washington on April 7, 2011 by a passing motorist. In 2002, the victim was formally identified, but her identity has not been publicly revealed. Now, to add on to this, Keyes also confessed to at least 1 murder in New York State. In late 2012, authorities had not determined the identity, age, or sex of the victim, or when and where the murder may have occurred, but regarded the confession as credible. So they were like, you know what? We're not sure any details, but we're pretty sure it's credible. I guess maybe lie detector tests they did or various other methods to confirm whether it was true or not, but they were pretty sure. He was also a suspect of the 2007 crimes known by the Boca Killer, who committed 3 known crimes associated with town center of Boca Raton and Boca Raton, Florida. The first case in the murder series was that of Randy Ann Malides Gorenberg, 52, who on March 23, 2007, was abducted from the Boca Town Center Mall parking lot. Within an hour, her body, which had 2 fatal bullet wounds, had been dumped at a different location. The second crime was the kidnapping of an unidentified woman and her toddler son from the same shopping mall parking lot on August 7, 2007. Though the kidnapper wore a mask and sunglasses, the victim caught glimpses of his face and described him as a tall, athletically built man with long hair, which generally matched Keyes' description. So he might have been this Boca Killer from Boca Raton, Florida as well. The woman was released unharmed after the assailant forced her to withdraw cash from an automated teller machine. The third Boca case was the murder of Nancy Bochico, 47, and her 7-year-old daughter, Joey Bochico Hauser, who was found fatally shot in their vehicle at the Boca Town Center parking lot on December 12, 2007. Authorities believe Keyes may have murdered 48-year-old woman Deborah Feldman after discovering that he had frequently searched for her missing persons case on his computer shortly before his arrest. So they went and looked at his computer, and shortly before his arrest, he had researched her. He'd been obsessed with it, and they're like, you know what? He might have killed her. Feldman was last seen in her apartment in Hackensack, New Jersey on April 8th, 2009. Her body has never been recovered. Federal agents showed Feldman's image to Keyes, upon which he hesitated. He waited and then only said, I don't want to talk about that yet. He didn't want to talk about it yet. He's like, yeah, I probably killed her, but I don't want to talk about it yet. Like, just, wow. He's like, you know what? I don't want to talk about that yet, but yeah, I did it. You know, he obviously did. He's like, yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Why? Because he has all the power. He knows he has all the cards. And so he's like, you know what? I just don't want to talk about it. But it's suspected that Keyes buried her near Tupper Lake, New York. They still don't know. That's still unsolved. Keyes is also still a suspect in the murder of 58-year-old James Jimmy Lamar Tidwell Jr., an electrician who disappeared in Mount Enterprise, Texas on February 15th, 2012. He was last seen at 5:30 a.m. that day after he'd finished working the night shift. During a bank robbery in Azle, Texas on February 16, 2012, the culprit, believed to be Keyes, wore a white hard hat similar to Tidwell's. His hair also resembled a dark-haired wig worn by Keyes during the robbery. When interrogated, Keyes stated that his wig was in fact human hair. When asked how he'd obtained the hair, Keyes said, "You don't have to buy real hair to get real hair." Wow. Like, just, wow. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting or more disturbing. Like, there's nothing wrong with studying fiction and nonfiction cases of serial killers. If there was, then I'd be in trouble because that's how this podcast works, is I've studied fiction and nonfiction cases of serial killers. And that's just because I'm fascinated with the human mind and I'm curious of how people go to these depths to do these horrific things. But Keyes also studied fiction and nonfiction cases of serial killers. He read Dean Koontz's 1995 thriller Intensity on several occasions and closely identified with the serial killer antagonist. And that's where it's wrong. It's fine to study fiction and nonfiction cases of serial killers, but when Keyes studied this shit, he identified with the evil killers. He felt close to them. He also closely studied Mindhunter inside the FBI's elite serial crime unit by FBI profiler John E. Douglas in his youth. He undertook a meticulous study of other serial killers. Keyes idolized Ted Bundy and felt that he had shared many similarities with them. Both Keyes and Bundy, by the way, felt that they were methodical, right? Both Keyes and Bundy were methodical, and Keyes felt as the same as Bundy did, that they possessed their victims, and despite their difference in victim choice and modus operandi, Keyes went as far as imitating Bundy's court escape and was immediately seized by guards. So he tried to do what Bundy did, but he was caught. The guards got him, and Keyes called Dennis Rader a wimp for apologizing in court and showing remorse for his crimes. He's like, showing remorse for your crimes? No, I don't do that. And so that shows that you got what was coming to you, Israel. Israel Keyes, you got what was coming to you. You deserve to be locked up. When asked in an interview about Alaska-based murderer Robert Hansen, Keyes replied enthusiastically stating, "Yeah, I know all about him." He continued, "I probably know every single serial killer that's ever been written about. It's kind of a hobby of mine." And it's a hobby of his because he wanted to imitate them, not because he was interested in the human mind or why humans do these things. It's because he wanted to be like these evil pieces of shit. When FBI agents informed him of the 2002 Aurora, Colorado shooting, he inquired as to the status of the shooter and had expressed mild interest in the perpetrator, James Holmes. Keyes was arrested by Texas Highway Patrol Corporal Brian Henry and Texas Ranger Stephen Rayburn in the parking lot of the Cotton Patch Cafe in Lufkin, Texas on the morning of March 13th, 2012. He was extradited to Alaska for his crimes committed there. On Wednesday, May 23rd, 2012, Keyes attempted to escape during a routine hearing using wood shavings from a pencil to pick his cuffs. U.S. Marshals used a taser to subdue him. Maureen Callahan reports part of Key's FBI file was not released due to claimed national security concerns. She notes his military experience and documented interest in explosive and speculates that he may have had known or suspected ties to violent extremist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. So she believed due to his military experience that he may have actually been involved in terrorist activity while he was serving his country. While being held at the jail in Anchorage Correctional Complex, Keyes managed to conceal a razor blade in his cell. It's uncertain how Keyes obtained the blade, as he was under security restrictions of using an electric razor only under supervision. But he died by suicide on December 2nd, 2012, by cutting his wrist in attempted strangulation. A suicide note was found under his body, consisted of an ode to murder, but offered no clear clues about other possible victims. So in his dying breath, in his dying moments, he taunted the FBI and the police, enjoying the power he still held. And to this day, the full extent of his crimes remains unknown. Some of his victims may never be found, their fates forever lost in the shadows of his secrets. Israel Keyes was a ghost, a predator who hid in plain sight. He had no pattern, no clear motive beyond the thrill of the hunt. He left behind only questions that may never be answered. But one thing is certain, Israel Keyes is one of the most terrifying serial killers in American history. This has been Threads of Evil. If you found this episode disturbing, you are not alone. I did when researching this guy, But if you could, make sure to subscribe and leave a review, and join me next time as we'll dive into another case of unspeakable horror. We're going to review the serial killer Louis Garvito, who had over at least 200 victims, supposedly. Until then, stay safe, don't talk to strangers, and remember, the threads of evil may be closer than you think.